So today is lesson 8. It's a cold, sunny Wednesday. We're back from reading week. Hopefully people had a good break. So here's what we're going to do today. I'm going to do a quick review of our midterm exam. I'm going to go over both assignments 2 and 3. I've made a little adjustment to the progression and how that's going to work. So we'll actually look at both assignments, sort of two parts of the same assignment, really. And then we're going to start looking at implementing authentication strategies within our Node Express MongoDB app. So we're going to be using an NPM package, a middleware that's known as Passport. And Passport has different strategies, different mechanisms for doing authentication. And today we're going to focus on local authentication. So storing user accounts in our MongoDB database. So we'll have to look at configuring Passport. We'll have to set up registration and login processes. And then once we have all of that infrastructure running, we can look at securing resources. So we can control who has access to do what within our Node music library. So I'm going to first start just doing with a quick review of the midterm. So there were several different versions of the exam. Let's see here. I'm just going to drag this over here for a second. Okay, so how do we do? Our exam results here were pretty challenging. Now, our overall score was 12 out of 25, which suggests the exam was pretty challenging. That does, however, include several students who missed the exam, so that's factored in. That brings our average down a little bit, but overall, that's still concerning to me. A number of students did not perform even the most fundamental tasks on the exam of even setting up a project with the Express generator and connecting to the database. So if you are not comfortable at this point in using your database and performing create, read, update, and delete, then I am going to recommend you go back to lessons 5 and 6 and redo those parts of the course from the YouTube videos so that you can get caught up, because you're going to need that learning being able to move forward into assignment 2 and assignment 3, which we're going to be talking about shortly. I will give a quick demo of an exam submission that was really well done. Keneal was nice enough to let me show his exam. So Keneal had this version of the TV streaming service exam. So he created a header and footer that were required. And he had a streamed index view that queried the database and displayed an HTML table. Many people were able to display the data, but they simply copied the HTML from our Node Tunes application and displayed the data as a list, whereas the instructions were to display the data in the table of rows and columns instead. And then I had the ability to create a new stream, choose from my 3 dropdowns. And when I added the stream, I would verify that the calculation was done properly to save the new document to MongoDB and also to calculate and display the proper total. And if I went to edit, he actually put the dropdowns back in to edit, which wasn't required. I could go ahead and update it and it would recalculate. So the main components that I was looking for were your database connection, in the global file, in app.js, I wanted to see a link to your new controller, as well as the path mapping to the controller. I wanted to see the database connection using our Mongoose package. You had to define a model with the required properties. You had to build the views for index, edit and create. And then in the controller, you needed to use your model and write the methods, the get method for the home page, for the list page that would retrieve all the data. And we needed get and post for create, as well as get and post for edit. So this is what I was kind of hoping for. This was an excellent submission by Keneal. Keneal got full marks. This is what I would consider a complete submission. And just so that you're aware, the format for our final exam is going to be quite similar to the format of the midterm exam. So it will be a practical exam. There's no question and answers. There's going to be multiple versions of it that are going to be assigned randomly. And you'll have 3 hours to do the coding. It will, however, focus more on what we do in the second half of the course. Not entirely, because we're still going to need some of the fundamentals from the first part of the course, but it will focus, the content will focus a little bit more on what we're going to be doing in the remaining 6 lessons of the class. So I know Keneal will be joining us a bit later. He has a presentation in one of the other classes. So I will just thank him for letting me show and give a demo of his project submission for the exam. Does anybody have any questions about the midterm exam? Again, I'll reiterate, if you found the exam really difficult, then I'll strongly encourage you to go back and review lessons 5 and 6 when we start working with MongoDB and we integrate our Node and Express application in with our database so that we can work with data. These fundamentals are going to be critical for assignment 2 and 3, which I'm going to have a look at right now. So we'll look at assignment 2. I'm going to go over assignment 2 and 3 together. I've also going to shifted the date slightly because assignment 2 is very small and assignment 3 is bigger. I'm going to make a change on how the calendar is laid out in the syllabus. So originally in our syllabus, assignment 2, which is very, very short, I'd allocated 2 weeks for assignment 2 and 2 weeks for assignment 3. However, I've realized assignment 2 is very small, assignment 3 is quite a bit bigger. So we're going to make 1 week for assignment 2 and 3 weeks for assignment 3. Give you an extra week for the large part. I also just want to check, okay, so we are at 20%. So I do just need to update that here as well. I should say 20%. And I'll update this on Blackboard. Okay, so for assignment 2, it is going to be due next Tuesday, but it's very short. Here's what you have to do for assignment 2. All you're going to do is fill out this brief one-page document. 5, really easy percent. So your need to propose, project plan. So if you were in my ASP.NET class, I had you fill out a very similar kind of form for an easy 5%. So you're going to build plan. What are you going to build for assignment 3? You're going to build something with Node, Express, and MongoDB. So I've provided a few examples here of what you might want to build. It has to contain create, read, update, and delete functionality, as well as authentication. You're free to build any kind of application you like. I know a lot of students like being able to choose what they build rather than me just saying, hey, I want you to build this. I know this is not something everybody likes. So if you're having trouble, you have no idea what to build, I don't want you to stress about it. Please email me or book an office hours appointment, and I can help you brainstorm some ideas to find a project plan that you're happy with. So for example, I know I asked you to do this for those of you who are in my ASP.NET class in the past, and Booger, if I recall, you emailed me and you weren't quite sure of having a little trouble finding the direction, right? And we talked about your home country, and you built a great project that was teaching people all about Turkey, about the food, about the culture, about some of the events and famous places. So that was a project. Booger, you could correct me if I'm wrong, or if that process worked out well for you. Okay, so I'm happy to help if you do not know, you have no direction and no idea what you want to build. Please reach out to me and we can work together to find something. Yeah, and I think you were pretty enthused about the project and you put a lot of work into it, but I know it was hard knowing the direction where you were going to go at first. So what typically I'll say, contact me if you don't know where to go. Let's talk about things you're interested in or things you think would be useful, and we'll find a project that you're excited to build. So don't stress if you need direction. Reach out to me and I'll help you. I'm glad it worked out, and I know you showed a lot of enthusiasm in the project, and you did really well, which is great. So I would rather have you build something that you're going to enjoy and you're passionate about. So all you need to do here is put your name in the document, explain briefly, like a sentence or brief paragraph, what is the project you're going to build, explain the utility, why is it useful. You're going to talk about, the basic application is just create, read, update, and delete an authentication, but you may have some additional features that you might implement. And I'll go into the details of the actual build. We'll look at that assignment 3 document as well in a minute. And you might list any NPM packages that contain some of that additional functionality that you might want. And I also want you to think about the design of the site. Are you going to write all your own CSS? Are you going to use a framework like Bootstrap or Pure CSS or Google Material Design? Are you going to be a combination? Why? So I want you to think about that, how you're going to do that. So this is all you need to submit for next Tuesday at 5 o'clock. So you have 6 days to 6.5 days to determine what your assignment 3 project is going to be. And I'm happy to help you if you need it. Okay, so that's assignment 2. So it is due next week, even though the syllabus does say it's not due until for 2 weeks. Next week, part of what we're going to do next week is we're going to have a lab. And in the lab, which we may even do in class, we'll see how our time goes. One of the things that we're going to do with this is you're going to swap your assignment 2, your project plan. You're going to trade it with someone else in the class. And your lab is going to be to review your partner's project plan and give them some feedback. So tell them, hey, here's what I like about your project plan, or here's a question I have, or here is a suggestion of something that I think might make your project plan better. Okay, so before you go ahead and build the project, you're going to get a chance to get some feedback from a classmate on your plan. So those would be, it's pretty easy marks for both the assignment and the lab. So I need everybody to submit the assignment to by next week. So then in class next week, I can partner people up and you have a chance to get some feedback as well as give some feedback. So now we'll look at assignment 3, which is also posted. So assignment 3 is not due. It's basically due at the end of the month in 4 weeks. So to submit, you will give me a live link to the site. You'll probably deploy your site on Heroku and a link to your private GitHub repository. Please make sure that, as usual, I'm invited so I can review the code. This is not group work. You have to do an independent assignment. You have to do all the work by yourself. You're free to reference code we've done in class, but you cannot download it, change it around, and submit it back to me as your own work. You have to. So anything I put on GitHub, it's for you to look at. It's not for you to copy or download and modify. If you want to use external code, you can do so, but here are the rules. Number 1, you have to make a comment where the code came from. It can't be more than 10% of the project, so you can't go and find a YouTube a tutorial and copy all of the code and give it to me as your project. That's plagiarism. You'll have to document it, and you also need to check with me beforehand. So if you find a code, something you want to use in your project, send me a link to it. Say, hey, Rich, here's some functionality that I want to use in my project. Here's the website where it comes from. Is it okay if I use this? And as long as the request is reasonable, I will approve it. So you're creating a secure Crud application. You're going to build a new web app using the Express generator. You're going to use MongoDB and Mongoose for your data. You can use the same database that we've already created in class for the node tunes. You don't have to go, because I think MongoDB, they only give you one free cluster. So you probably can't make a second database for free. So you can just use your existing database and put whatever collections you need for your assignment in that database. You're going to use HPS templates for the user interface and use controller files for your application logic. You're going to customize the design of your application with CSS. If you want to use Bootstrap, that's fine. You can use third-party library. However you do it, just make a note in the README file as to where the CSS comes from. You're also going to implement authentication, which we're going to start working with today, and that'll carry on into next week's lesson, so that only the home page, register, and login page are public. And you'll have a read-only page displaying data. So in other words, when somebody is not logged into the site, all they can do is view things. They can't change anything. Any other pages for users where they can create, update, or delete, those pages would all have to be private. So you will have one public page that displays data from your database, but it's read-only, so there'll be no ability for users to change it. Then users can register and log in. They should also be able to log in with their GitHub account. And you can find an NPM package that will help you do this. And then you'll build private pages so authenticated users can also add, edit, delete data. Update, edit. I'll just post an updated version of this. I guess I have to make a few changes here. You'll make sure that the delete functionality includes a delete confirmation. And then you're going to add at least one other feature that shows some independent learning. So something that we have not covered in class that you are going to figure out how to implement. So I've given you some options here. So use an authentication provider other than local authentication or GitHub. You might include file uploading. You might add a keyword search or some other feature that you want, some other piece of functionality using Node.js that you want to include. Make sure you list this feature in your README file so I know what it is and I can give you marks for it. Okay, so the assignment is out of 38. So that feature you're going to choose is worth 4 of the marks. And again, you don't have to use any of these. You can pick some other kind of functionality of your own. Okay, so we have all of November to do this. Over the first week, you're going to propose what you're building, and then you have 3 weeks to actually do the build of the site. So at the end of November, your project should be finished. I'll just re-upload this to Blackboard, overwrite the file. Are there any questions? So assignment 2 is here. Assignment 3 submission is here. Are there questions from anybody? I don't know why it says 2084. Maybe. Okay. So start thinking about what kind of application you want to build using Node, Express, and MongoDB. As I said, please reach out if you're stuck. And we'll find a project idea for you that you're happy with. All right, so let's dive into authentication with Passport. So I've got this PDF, a little bit different format instead of a slide deck. It's a reference here, this week 8 authentication using Passport. I'm just going to go over this at a high level. This is kind of a long document. I'm not going to go over all of it. So we want to talk about Passport strategies. We're going to look at how do we integrate Passport into our Node site. And then we want to look at using a local strategy. So that means where our users are stored in our database. They're not stored in some third-party service. And then we'll also maybe take a brief look at what other kinds of login strategies or login services Passport supports. So Passport, it's a middleware. It sits in between the Express server so that we can use it to authenticate user requests. And it gives us a number of different strategies. This term strategy really just refers to different authentication methods. So there'll be a series of NPM modules or packages that we will want to install. So the base module is called Passport. And then we'll install that, and we're going to need to install a few other packages along with Passport today. We're going to have to then configure it in our app.js. So we'll require it. And then we'll also need to initialize it, and Passport will also manage user sessions. So when keeps a login active so long as that user browser's window is open. So it uses the Express session object to do this. So not only are we going to use Passport, but we're going to use Passport local as our strategy for today. So our users are going to get stored in MongoDB with a typical username password combination. One of the neat things is that this Passport local package, it will automatically do things like password hashing for us. It'll do things like validating user logins with a really small amount of code. Yes, we're going to need a user module. Glad you like that, Jillian. And then we're also going to add some other configuration in terms of this serialize and deserialize. This basically is for writing the user data into a session, the session object, or deserializing is reading, it's getting the user object out of the session. So as the user travels around our site, we can obviously be knowing who the user is, keeping track of them. Some of this code's a little bit old. It's a little bit longer than we need to. So we'll create a simple user model, much simpler than in these slides. We'll create register and login views. I've actually created these views already and put them up on Blackboard so we can just download them. That's right. You got it, Jillian. That's exactly right. We can skip over some of this. And then there's other strategies as well. So things like GitHub login, for example, which we'll implement either later today or next week. Or there's a Google strategy, there's a Facebook strategy, for example. So we're going to start with our local strategy where we store the usernames and password in our MongoDB, and then we'll implement GitHub strategy either today or next week, and you'll do that as well in your assignment. So I'm also just going to go to the Passport site. The Passport documentation is not great. So we'll look here. So it says it's simple, unobtrusive auth for Node. That's what we like for any Express-based web application. It actually has over 500 different authentication strategies. So for example, if we want to use, this one's a little old, like we wanted to use Passport for Twitter authentication. There's a Passport-Twitter package. And there's documentation here about how to set it up and configure it, along with some examples. So we're mostly interested in the username and password docs. This is our local strategy. Yeah, they might. They actually might. So let's open up our project. I've already got my project open. So go ahead and open up your code editor and let's open the Node Tunes project. So our first step is going to take us a little while. It's probably going to take us the rest of this first hour of class we're just going to do configuration. So we're going to do configuration. That's a shame. Then we're going to do, the ability to register and log in. And once we can do that, then we can secure access to different resources and part of the site third. So kind of 3-step process for this. So we need to install several NPM packages. And I've actually listed them here right on Blackboard. We need 4 packages: Passport, Passport-local, Passport-local-mongoose. So this is for when we're working with MongoDB database. And then the Express session for session management, so we can keep a user's identity. We can have it persist as they navigate through our website using the session object. So you can install these one at a time. You can also install them in a single command if you want. We haven't really done this before, I don't think. If I run the command npm I, I can actually just separate the package names with spaces. I'm going to install passport, passport-local, passport-local-mongoose, and express-session. I'll leave this up for a minute. Again, you can run 4 separate npmi commands if you want and install the packages one at a time. If you want to be a little more efficient, we can run a single command that installs all 4 packages. So I'm going to do that. Again, you can, if you want, you can just copy and paste the package names direct from Blackboard. I've already put them up there for you. So I'm going to try to run this. I'll just hit enter. It installs quite quickly, added a total of 13 packages. And now we can start our configuration. So most of this work is going to happen in our app.js. So once you've installed those 4 packages, open up app.js. Just minimize my terminal window. And I'm going to go up to line 6. So we've got all of our packages here. So we're going to add passport for auth. So I'll declare passport. I guess I can actually just declare it as const. We'll also want to declare a reference to express session. So passport for auth, express session, or session management. Now it's important where we enable passport. We can't put it anywhere in this file. I want to actually put the passport configuration above this section here. Can anybody think of why? Why should we configure passport for authentication? These 3 lines I've highlighted in blue. Yes, Adam, you're right, but let's be a little more specific maybe. Why would we need to configure our authentication and authorization before we declare our controllers, or we reference the controllers? Why couldn't we declare the controllers first? Yeah, exactly, Chris and Adam, you got it. Our artist controller here, it's going to use passport. So we need to ensure that passport is configured before those controllers get referenced. We need to configure passport before referencing controllers, since controllers will need to use passport. So where this code goes is important. It has to go above our controller declarations. Mila, excellent question. We are going to use passport local. We don't actually need it. We don't need to reference it directly. That's why. It has to be, it kind of works behind the scenes. So passport will use it, but we don't need to write any code that directly references passport local here. We can create it. It's just not required. Excellent question. Okay, so step one in our configuration is we're going to configure our app to use sessions. So we're going to call app.use on our session, and there are a few options with some required options. So when we enable sessions, there's three options we have to provide here. The first one is a secret value, and this can be some random string 1, 2, 3. We just provide any sort of string value. So we've got the secret. We've got a resave parameter, which we're going to set to true. So that means each time our user makes a new HTTP request, we want to refresh the session. We want to keep it alive. And the last parameter is called save uninitialized, meaning when somebody first comes to the website, they haven't logged in. Do we need to start a session for them? We're going to set that to no. We only really need to enable the session when a user signs into the website. So you can put in any value here. I just put in some random string at 1, 2, 3, but this can be any kind of secret, any string. So we're enabling session management. No, it just doesn't. It says it's a typo. That's fine. So that's step one. Step two is enable passport. So we're going to call passport.initialize. Then we're also going to call passport.session. So this is actually a method. So we're going to enable passport with session support. So passport is going to use sessions for user management. Now we're going to come back to this file. There's two more steps in the passport configuration. There's 4 steps total here. But our third step is we need to reference, we need a model for managing user accounts. We don't have that right now. We look in our project, the only model we have is an artist model. So I'm going to leave this file just for now. And we need to create a user model, and then we need to configure Passport. We need to say, hey, the users are managed through our user model class. So we're going to go and create that model class. And it's going to look pretty similar to the model that we've created before, with one exception. So in our models folder, we are going to right click and we're going to make a new JavaScript file. We will call it user. That'll be singular, and typically the file names are lowercase. Just call it user. And it's going to be fairly similar to our artist model, which we can look at. So we're going to require Mongoose. We're going to create a schema. We're going to export that schema. So we're going to do similar things with our user model. We're just going to need to add a couple of other things. So we'll require Mongoose. We'll call it user schema. So we'll make a new Mongoose schema like we did before. Our user only requires two really simple properties. Passport expects, when we're using Passport local, a username and a password as a string. So we'll just define those. And these should be lowercase. We'll export it. We'll make it public. So far, this is exactly the same as our artist schema. Chris, we don't really have to, because Passport will do that for us. I believe it will do it for us. We can actually test it, but I think it will. If it doesn't, we can always come back and put that on here. So we're going to export this as a Mongoose model called user with a capital U. So far, there's no difference at all between the user model and the artist model, other than they have different names and slightly different properties. We'll just toggle back, right? Our artist has a name property only. So far, this just looks like a regular, it's a regular model. The thing is, we need to add a couple things here, because this is not just a standard model. We need to configure this model for Passport, so Passport knows this model is used for doing strategy. Here, Booker, where it says document, that's just a code hint. That's not my code, that's WebStorm. Just like here, it says definition. So that's not in the code. That's just a prompt for me from my code editor. Good question. Yeah, it says name. I don't know. Well, it should be. It's uppercase here as well, so I'm not exactly sure. Oh, yes, sorry. I should pay attention to the errors. That should be a lowercase m. Thank you. That's why. Thank you for pointing that out, Bugra. Nice catch. So it looks the same. We're now going to add 2 lines of code here. We need to create a variable called PLM. And we're going to reference our Passport local Mongoose. So Mila, this is going to come back to, yep, no, that's great that you caught that. I missed it. So Mila, you asked, why don't we have a reference to Passport local? Passport local Mongoose uses passport local under the hood. So it has to be there, but we don't reference it. So we don't need this reference in our artist model because our artist model has nothing to do with authentication, but our user model is special. We need this module so this model can be used for auth. So what are we going to do with this passport local mongoose? What does it do? Passport local mongoose, it's basically an extension to a model class that allows a model to be used by Passport for user management. So we're going to use Passport local mongoose to extend this model's functionality so it can include user management and authentication. So to do this, we're going to call this method in Mongoose called plugin. And plugin does exactly what I've described in the comment. It extends the functionality. Oops. So we're going to use our variable, our constant we've defined on line 2. It basically means this model is special. It's not a regular model file. It's used for performing local authentication with Passport and Mongoose. So it's just like our artist model, except we've got this additional reference on line 2, and then we've got this plugin, which means extend the functionality. We can have a quick look at the Mongoose plugin. Description, a bit more of how this works. So schemas are pluggable. They allow to apply pre-packaged capabilities to extend the functionality. So a plugin is a tool for reusing logic in multiple schemas. And there's a whole bunch of plugins we can use, for example. So our user class, it is a model, but it's a special kind of model. It's used for extending Passport local mongoose for authentication. So now that we've got this model, we can go back to app.js and we need to complete steps 3 and 4 of our Passport setup. So let's do that now. We've got a few more lines. I think we've got about 4 more lines of code that need to go in our app.js, and then our configuration should be ready to go. So go back here. We've got our first 2 steps. So we've got our Passport declarations here. We've got our first 2 steps. I will be pushing all this code to GitHub shortly. So now we've got step 3, which is link Passport to the user model, which extends Passport local mongoose. So we'll declare a constant called user that just points to our user model. Okay, so we're referencing the user model we just created. And then we're going to enable this Passport local mongoose has this built-in method called create strategy. We'll see. It's telling me this method needs parameters. We'll see. Okay. Let's just go. We'll go to the Passport site for a moment. Look at Passport local. So here, whether using a strategy, okay, well, we may have to adjust this a little bit. That's okay. And our last step is set Passport to read and write user data to and from the session object. So we've got two methods. We've got serialize user. So this is writing user to the session. Good point. Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Yes, this is going to have to go. Right, I've called app.use here, but I haven't created the app. Thank you. I'm going to move that up above. Nice catch. So this var app equals express, this should go before we use Passport. Yeah, well, node-mod's good for that. And then if we can serialize the user, we can also deserialize. And those are method calls, so we'll need brackets at the end. I know this is complaining a little bit. We may have to adjust it a little bit. We'll see. Okay. I'm going to push, well, I'm going to try to see if my app will run. I'll put the code up on GitHub in a minute. Yeah, okay. So it says the app will run. So even though there seem to be some errors in some things my WebStorm didn't like, we seem to be up and running. Okay, I'm going to push all the code up to GitHub now. So if you missed something, you can go and reference it from there. We will take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 12:05. And then we can start to work on our register and login features. Once we have those working, we can try to control access to resources and give anonymous users and authenticated users different permissions, a different experience. So we will come back. I'm going to upload now, and we will come back at 12:05.